No one needs to forgive themselves this year. In fact, it's time to stop wearing our dietary habits and exercise habits as a badge of honor. You know, no one gets a medal for eating the healthiest during a global pandemic, and no one wins for being the most committed to their exercise regimen. Ditch the guilt and start pouring gasoline on growth and compassion, because what we know is that those two things actually improve our health. Sure, for those of you watching, you may think, maybe not, Theresa. Maybe I continue on an endeavor towards the ideal body that I need that meets my perception of health. And maybe I'll continue to do that with my patients. But we have to keep in mind, right? Depending on the source, around 90 to 95% of people, quote unquote, fail diets. So all of us folks went to college. Let's say there was a college class of 100 of us, and I'm one of them. And 90 to 95% of the college kids in that class fail. I don't know about you all, but are we going to be looking at each other saying, gosh, why do we suck? we need to forgive ourselves and do better next time. Or maybe we need to look at, in that example, the instructor or the intervention. Is that actually effective? And what we know about diets are that they're not. Oftentimes, when we think about health, we think about weight. And look, weight is a topic on which many views are strongly held in the absence of scientific evidence to support those views. And some views are strongly held despite evidence to contradict those views. And so I'll just cut to the chase. Any society that rejects someone based on their shape or size because it doesn't match an impossible ideal is the problem. You know, we don't need to create this problem for ourselves in society to then have to forgive ourselves. So let's start by challenging an inaccurate belief. Weight is not a behavior. I'll say that again for all of us. Weight is not a behavior, and therefore weight is not an appropriate target for behavior change or behavior modification. And forgiving ourselves is assuming that we've done something wrong, when maybe all we've done this past year is make huge efforts at keeping ourselves safe and healthy and keeping our families safe and healthy, especially during a time where there is so much social deprivation, when we're actually in survival mode or in a means of survival. And so reframing these thoughts can help cultivate more self-compassion while hopefully eating intuitively as much as possible. And, you know, speaking of intuitive eating, it really loops in this idea of compassion, or replacing this idea of forgiveness, self-forgiveness with self-compassion. A review study published in 2014 by the Journal of Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics found 20 studies that used intuitive eating as an intervention to improve psychological and physical well-being. This included an intervention that was targeting different lifestyle habits and body image and eating habits, in which they actually found positive outcomes. They also found a significant positive change in things such as overall psychological health. And even more interesting, the improvements that occurred sustained over 2 years, and ultimately had a completion rate of 92% of participants. Again, if we're looking at health and weight from a bigger lens, I don't know about you guys, but it seems as though things such as psychological health and a completion rate of 92% sounds pretty sustainable to us during a time when all we're trying to do is sustain or even maintain. And we know overall, studies that encourage individuals to eat intuitively, to be compassionate with ourselves or non-judgmental, really helped participants abandon some of those unhealthy weight control behaviors that many of ourselves or our patients are using right now during this global pandemic to quote unquote stay in shape or to be healthy or find health. When again, in addition to ditching unhealthy weight controlling behaviors, these studies also found improvements in metabolic fitness, improvements in body satisfaction, and again, overall improvement in psychological distress. And so, speaking of psychological distress, let's talk about shame and guilt, because those are two very things that keep ourselves or our patients stuck in a cycle. No one is motivated by being shamed or guilted into something, right? So here's an example activity for yourself or for your patients. Start each day now during this global pandemic, saying out loud to yourself, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for and thankful for that my body is doing for me right now? Not in the past, not what you're going to get to right now. And see if you can focus on the functions of your body versus appearance or things like that. And see if you can find appreciation. So for example, for some of us, it's using our feet to get to work each day or having different, talents that help keep us afloat. So what can we be thankful for each and every day right now as we do our very best with things such as eating patterns, exercise habits, etc. And maybe instead of this body love and forgiving ourselves for things we've done and moving towards this idea of perfection, maybe it's time to accept. Maybe it's time to accept that bodies change, right? And so let's start there. It's time to reject this idea that gaining the COVID-19 pounds, similarly to the freshman 15, that's more important than the serious efforts we've all been making to stay safe and healthy and keep our families and colleagues and friends safe and healthy. And I think it's time for us to understand that bodies change, and that is okay. There will be a weight that's well for us, or our well weight. There will be a weight that's well for us at different stages of our life, different ages in our life, or different phases of our life. And I think we could all agree that living during a global pandemic is indeed going to be a phase in our life that will ultimately have the natural consequence of a weight that may be well for us at that time, if that's the weight we were at as we were trying to cope and survive, and maybe not doing our quote unquote ideal versions of eating habits with variety, moderation, and balance, or with, different aspects of movement or lack thereof. And that's okay. And it's time to come to the conclusion that bodies are meant to change. And so if you think, what is well weight? And so our well weight, or our patient's well weight, is the weight in which their body settles at when doing the following. 1, eating a variety of foods without judgment or fear, and doing our best to get there. And the weight in which we settle at there may be just okay in that moment. 2, well weight would be a weight in which we're able to have attunement to biological cues, hunger and fullness cues, right? Possibly the ability to move, or doing our best to move if we want to, if we can. And lastly, making sure we're using coping tools or effective ways of coping that aren't just centered around food. And if we are using food, pairing it with other coping tools like reaching for support, self-soothing, grounding techniques, a lot of those things that as dietitians, we may not have in our back wheelhouse if we don't readily use it. So get savvy with that stuff, because a weight that's well for us is a moving target. And I believe that as soon as we start understanding this idea alone is the way that we're going to help shift away from this ever-evolving diet culture of the next diet or what you need to do during COVID to keep this quote-unquote genes from high school. I mean, it's time to really make this shift and look at a more holistic and inclusive, honestly, approach at nutrition, weight, and health. Thank you so much to those listening in. My name's Theresa Carmichael, registered dietitian, and I've been working in eating disorders and disordered eating for the last 7 years. I currently work with Center for Discovery or Discovery Behavioral Health as their National Dietary and Operations Specialist. And I have experience in all levels of care within eating disorders and mental health, including outpatient, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization, residential treatment, as well as inpatient. I am also your mental health resource professional for the Behavioral Health Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group within the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Thank you so much.